So over the years, I've been asked a lot about the relationship between ENFPs and IQ. Is there a relationship? And if so, what is that? Now, the first thing we need to do here is define what is IQ. And unlike some of the things you may have heard, IQ is actually very definable. It's one of the most easy to define and test for traits. It tests very consistently, and it's a thing. There's no arguing with that. There was a lot of talk, I think, in the 2000s, probably still now, that I just don't hear about emotional intelligence and other measures. There's 20 types of intelligence, and that kind of is true, but when we're talking about IQ actually measures one very specific thing. It's been measured the same way for, I think, about 100 years. It's accurate, and it makes us very uncomfortable because IQ is fixed. It can go down, but basically doesn't really go up. And there's a fairly high genetic component with it as well. So it's one of those things that's not very American, like this whole thing of like anyone can do anything. It's like you have your fixed IQ, and that will determine what jobs you can do really well and what jobs you can't, and it will determine a lot about you. And we don't like to think that way, but we're here on the channel to be somewhat, even though we're all idealists here, we're here to be realistic as well and practical. And so IQ is a thing, and it's pretty fixed, whatever your IQ happens to be. Now, what IQ measures is your ability to solve problems and essentially learn new things very quickly. So if you look at a standard IQ test, they're looking at pattern recognition, like how quickly you can look at something, figure out patterns, and solve a problem. And so what that means is for a job that is quite consistent, where you have to learn something and then basically do the same thing, your IQ will affect a little bit how quickly you can learn it, but in the long run, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to predict how well you can do at that job. In fact, having a high IQ might mean you get really bored of that consistent job early and don't do very well in it. Where IQ can measure job success a lot is a job that requires a lot of different things happening all the time. I mean, for instance, being an online entrepreneur, you're learning things all the time. Like, how does podcasting work? How does YouTube work? How do you film a video? How do you edit a video? How do you market a video? How do you set up a channel? There's a lot of things to learn very quickly and a lot of problems to solve. So probably being a bit higher in IQ would help with that, right? Where you're able to quickly learn a ton of different things and have a lot of that different stimulus. The same can be true for managing a large company. I guarantee if you were to take the IQs of executives at large companies, they would all be well above average on the IQ scale. I would guess something like 130 and above would be normal. And that's just how it is. We can tell ourselves that anyone can do it, but really if you have an IQ of 90, it's going to just be really, really hard to do that. The same way if you're someone who's really introverted, it's going to be hard to be a salesperson who goes to conferences and party events and meets thousands of people every day, right? The same way if you're an extrovert, it's going to be really hard to lock yourself in a room and write for 10 hours a day without human contact. It's better to acknowledge our limitations within reason, of course, and then build a great life around that than try to fight against how we're really wired to be in that. Now, of course, what we're all here for is ENFPs and IQ, and in general, ENFPs are going to be above average in terms of IQ. And this is related to a few things, right? And some of this is my kind of theorizing on the fly, I'll be honest, and some of this is more based in research, is that our main function is extroverted intuition, right? And intuition is generally tied with intelligence. Now, keep in mind, if you haven't studied statistics and that, being above average does not mean if you are an ENFP, you are above average, and it does not mean all ENFPs are above average, but it means if you were to take all ENFPs IQ, it's probably slightly above 100. 100, by the way, is the average IQ. That's the entire setup of the IQ system, is that 100 is the average, right? And I think 68% of people fall between 85 and 115. That's the one standard deviation, if I'm remembering all this right. So your average ENFP will have a slightly higher IQ than the average person. And this makes sense if you think about it. What are ENFPs all about? Taking in a lot of information, seeing patterns, solving problems. Extroverted intuition is an IQ machine in a way, right? So it does make sense. I'm not saying we're all Einsteins by any measure, but it does make sense that we're going to be quicker at solving problems, since the main way we take in information and interact with the world is about taking in tons of data, seeing patterns, solving problems, etc., right? And this makes a little more sense now if you think about it, right? If you have extroverted intuition as your main function, as we do, and you have a higher IQ, you'll learn things a lot quicker, which means you probably get bored, because we might say, let's say you take a new job, and for the average person in that position, there's a 1-year learning curve. And so that means for the first year, they're really stimulated. They're always learning and improving and growing. And you take that job and like 2 months in, you're like, I got this. Like, this was not very hard, right? Then you're going to be getting bored because you won't be learning. And if you're in a larger company, there's a chance you get stuck in the bureaucracy, right? So maybe they spot that and they say, hey, this person's really quick learning. Let's move them through the stages quicker, right? They can learn faster. Let's foster that talent. If you're in a larger organization, maybe you get stuck there with 10 months of total boredom. Now, hopefully you'll have someone above you, some kind of mentor who sees your ability to learn quickly, sees that talent, and helps you foster it and accelerate you along. I had this kind of related. When I was in grade 2, I was really good at math. And fortunately, Miss Novakowski, the best teacher ever, saw that, and she got a grade 7 student to mentor me. So like in grade 2, I was doing grade 5 math, and I would leave during the normal math and go do that, because I was bored as hell with the grade 2 math. And that was amazing. And I owe Miss Novakowski a lot for that. And I had a few teachers along the way who would see this. And that's what you want, right? You want someone who can say, hey, you learn this really quick. Let's accelerate you along so you can keep learning. But think about that as an ENFP, right? The way you feel at the beginning of something where you're learning really, really quickly, if you could always be learning that way, how much you would accelerate and how much you would learn. And that is what high-performing cultures like schools or companies or having your own business, it's one of the reasons I love working for myself, is I have the ability to just always be learning. There's not a cutoff where I'm like, I learned everything I can, I'm bored now, right? I can keep learning more and doing more. That's what we really need. If you are an ENFP and you are, significantly above average, especially in terms of IQ, you're going to need some kind of an environment like that. And I guess that kind of covered my last point I did want to mention, is there are a lot of ENFPs with a high IQ. Sometimes I hear from people and there's an assumption that ENFPs are dumb. I don't know why. Maybe there's some ENFP channels who have videos like, life is so hard, oh my God, this is so complicated. And that could promote the stereotype, but I've talked to many ENFPs who are on the genius scale of IQ. Myself, I was doing math contests and chess tournaments when I was in elementary school, and I'm an ENFP, so we can do very well in those traditional high IQ things like chess or math or the sciences, if that is what really interests us. It's not our most natural fit. I mean, I obviously didn't go into math or chess as a career. I'm very glad I went into psychology because I get a lot more stimulation from understanding people more than I do looking at numbers or chess pieces or whatever else. But keep that in mind. You are not limited in terms of what you could do as an ENFP. Although my hunch is if you are an ENFP with a high IQ, you're going to get more satisfaction doing something involving people, because that's something that we're almost uniquely suited for, rather than type that might be very high IQ and is a lot more rational with their thinking. So they prefer to deal with numbers and metrics than people. So it definitely makes sense for us to take advantage of our higher IQ combined with our interest in people and understanding of emotions. And by the way, I am Dan and this is Dreams Around the World, and I film new videos every week, mostly for ENFPs and other idealist types, helping you become the best version of yourself, all while creating the most awesome life possible for you and those you love. I'm kind of the ENFP master here on YouTube, so consider hitting that subscribe button. When you're done considering it, obviously you concluded, yes, why would I not subscribe to this guy's channel? So you hit the subscribe button, hit the bell if you want to be notified for new videos. And if you want to learn more about ENFPs and get some of my insights into our type and how we can really function best and succeed in this ESTJ world of ours, you can head to dreamsaroundtheworld.com/ENFP training. I'll include that link as a card and in the description as well. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video soon.